Andrew Recinos, President and CEO. I'm a white person with brown hair, wearing glasses and a blue blazer and a white shirt, and my pronouns are he and him. What are you reading right now? I love asking this question because everyone's got an answer, whether it's a book or an audiobook or a blog. I once had someone answer spreadsheets. The poor soul. You know, as much as I like asking this question, I love answering it, right? There could be no better humble brag than really sticking the landing on this one. What am I reading? Anna Karenina. I mean, you know, rereading it in its original Russian. Of course, that's a joke. I've never read Anna Karenina because it is a work of fiction, and I do not read fiction. No, when I answer that question, it is always a management book by a business school professor. The stack of books on my nightstand, it looks like this. Or it did until March of 2020. Now, I'm sure each of us has a word that you could conjure up for that month, whether it was shock or disbelief. For me, that word was grasping. Grasping for advice, for inspiration, for something to hold on to. And the first place I started grasping was those management books. I needed those professors to show me the way. And as that month unfolded, the stack of books on my nightstand grew and grew and grew until it was like a leaning tower of synergistic, strategically aligned paradigm shifts. And it wasn't enough. For once, the management books weren't enough because they couldn't stave off everything that was happening in here. And so I put them to one side, and I sort of surprised myself by picking up poetry. Maya Angelou and Mary Oliver and Rumi, and my grasping started to subside. You see, because management books, they work all up in here. Poetry nourishes down at the roots. Just consider a couple lines from the Mary Oliver poem, The Summer Day. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Management books inform. Poetry inhabits. I needed both, and by the end of that month, the professors and the poets had become my pandemic pillars. And yet there was still something missing. Real people navigating these unreal times. In addition to the professors and the poets, I needed my peers. Which is how I found myself calling up arts and culture executives every single day with an agenda that could fit on a Post-it. How are you? How is your team? What are you reading? And by the end of that year, I had filled a stack of notebooks with real-world insights from leaders all across the globe. And so today I'm going to share with you what I learned from the professors, the poets, and the peers. Now, during the planning of this conference, we've had a mantra for how we talk about the last couple years. Learn from that time, we tell each other, but don't dwell in it. We need to keep moving forward. So I'm not going to dwell. But I do think it is important to honor, even if just for a moment, this wounded world that we're living through. The words of Maya Angelou. History, despite its wrenching pain, cannot be unlived. But if faced with courage, need not be lived again. So it didn't take long before I just wanted to tune it all out, you know? I craved a different kind of energy, a roll-up-your-sleeves energy, a damn-the-torpedoes energy, and that is when I found Rumi. Jalal al-Din Muhammad Rumi was a Persian Sufi mystic who lived 800 years ago and wrote verse that was somehow both optimistic and realistic. My very favorite Rumi poem starts with this line: "Run forward, the way will spring open to you." It's a challenge to be bold and to have a little faith, and it really landed with me in those first couple of months. Now, it turns out that there is a professor who kind of agrees with this poet. Less than a week into those lockdowns, Brett Egan, the president of the DeVos Institute of Arts Management at the University of Maryland, appeared with Eric Gensler on the Capacity Interactive podcast. And after discussing kind of the urgency around health and safety and finances, Egan gave what I considered a startling piece of advice. He said, "People will be attracted to nothing less than an absolutely visionary concept for the future of your organization. What a thing to say 6 days into the lockdown. But he wasn't wrong. He was not wrong. His advice was based on years of working with hundreds of organizations alongside his colleague, Michael Kaiser. And he went on, he said, people will not follow an organization that seems despondent, but they will follow an increased and not business as usual vision for the future. Said another way, run forward. The way will spring open to you. So says the poet on the parchment and the professor on the podcast, but could I find a peer practicing the art of running forward? In fact, I could. Meet Tanya. When we first spoke, Tanya Castroverde-Moskalenko was the executive director of the Miami City Ballet. Her story starts in August of 2018, which was the month she took over the helm. The ballet was beloved in their community, at the top of their game artistically, and facing some financial and administrative challenges. And from her first week, she was in listening mode. She met with her leadership team and the artistic team and board members, and she heard about the need for building improvements and requests for technology projects and aspirations for more community education initiatives and dreams to mount bold new productions like Balanchine's Firebird and a brand new Swan Lake. And as Tanya was listening to all those dreams, she was joined by the ballet's CFO, John Shoemaker. And he kept a running tally of all the potential costs. And by the end of weeks of meetings, that number at the bottom of John's spreadsheet was, by all accounts, ludicrous. The cost of all those dreams, massive and a little depressing. And this would have been the eminently logical moment for them to scale back their ambitions, to silence the swans, to douse the Firebird. But that team did no such thing. They chose to run forward. They would invest in the Firebird and Swan Lake. They would invest in more community education initiatives. They would invest in that unsexy work of building maintenance and 401ks, and they would raise, somehow, that ludicrous number at the bottom of John's spreadsheet, because they believed, just like Brett Egan did, that people would follow an increased and not business as usual vision for the future. And a few weeks later, just 2 months into her tenure, Tanya stood before her board and proposed the single biggest campaign in their history, $55 million over 4 years to transform the Miami City Ballet. And the board went for it. And just like the poet and the professor suggested, the way began to spring open. By the end of 2018, they had raised $16 million and they kept running. And by the end of 2019, they had raised $28 million and they kept running. And in February of 2020, they debuted their gorgeous new Firebird. And in March of 2020, Tanya said to me, we thought about just ending the campaign right there. But the team discussed this at length, and they banked on the generosity of Americans to dig deep in times of crisis, and they kept running forward. And by the end of that year, they presented an outdoor nutcracker for the people of Miami. And when they could get back into the theater, they did debut that new Swan Lake to international acclaim, and just a few months ago, they brought their campaign to a close. So did they raise the ludicrous $55 million? No, they raised $65 million, and the Miami City Ballet is transformed. I called Tanya not long ago because I had one more question. I said, how did you know? How did you know you were going to succeed? And she said, we didn't know. We didn't know we were going to succeed, but we knew we had to succeed. And I think to me, that's the lesson. When the odds are against you, but you believe so deeply in what you're doing, dare to have an extraordinary vision, to run forward and have faith that the way will spring open to you. The words of Jorge Luis Borges. And you learn to build all your roads on today, because tomorrow's ground is too uncertain for plans. You know, build all your roads on today could have been the mantra of Janice Burley Wilson when she took over as the head of the August Wilson African American Cultural Center, a gleaming building in the heart of downtown Pittsburgh, named for the Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright and hometown hero. In 2017, when Janice became executive director, the August Wilson Center was 9 years old and climbing out of bankruptcy. She had one employee. And on the day they walked into the office for the first time, they found it completely empty. As she said, there was no computer, no printer, no phones, no pens or pencils or supplies of any kind. But her bigger challenge was the spoken and unspoken skepticism, as she said, that surrounded their culturally specific institution. She told me there was a lot of attention paid to the fact that they were an African-American-run organizations, a lot of eyes on us, as she said, and she realized that they had to do everything better than everyone else. Now, she had big plans for the August Wilson Center, but she also knew that this was not the moment to proclaim that they were going to run forward. Not yet, not with one employee and no phones. She had to work with what she had. She had to start by building all her roads on today. And so in that first year, she just added a few staff and produced a few key artistic events, including the Pittsburgh International Jazz Festival. And they found that by producing just a small number of events of the highest possible quality, that they began to attract and excite audiences and artists and funders. And now another leader in this moment would have hit the gas, would have added a bunch more staff, would have added a bunch more programs, but Janice did not. As she said to a reporter at the time, "We are growing slowly, taking careful and calculated steps." Now, with her disciplined approach, Janice was modeling a concept from one of my favorite professors, Jim Collins. In his book, Great by Choice, written with Morton Hansen, they profile companies that thrive in turbulent times, including a concept that they call the 20-mile march. So imagine a long-distance hiker who endeavors to march, or hike, should I say, exactly 20 miles every single day, rain or shine. On the hard days, they really have to muscle through to get all the way to 20. And on the easy days, they stop at 20, even if they could have gone on for several more hours. According to these professors, companies that thrive in turbulent times often act just like this hiker, having, they say, the ambition to achieve and the self-control to hold back, valuing consistent progress over huge peaks and valleys, just like Janice and the August Wilson Center. And at the end of her first year, they had welcomed 75,000 visitors, and they recorded a small surplus. At the end of the second year, they had welcomed 119,000 visitors and recorded another small surplus. And by year 3, the wind was really at their back, as evidenced by this headline in the Pittsburgh Tribune, which proclaimed them on track for comeback. This article was posted on February 16th, 2020. But remember, 20-mile march companies don't overreach in the hard times so that they can muscle through in the difficult ones, and the August Wilson Center was no different. Even though they suffered major losses from canceled performances, they continued to forge ahead. They continued to connect with their audiences digitally. They continued to have small surpluses. And last year, the International Jazz Festival returned in person, and just a few months ago, they opened their new flagship exhibit, August Wilson, The Writer's Landscape, the first ever exhibit devoted exclusively to the life and work of their namesake. It's a timed admission show. It has been sold out since it opened. And today, the August Wilson African American Cultural Center is one of the largest cultural organizations devoted exclusively to the African American experience. Their team has grown from 1 to 20. Their budget has increased fourfold. They have recorded a surplus every year since Janice took over, and they have done it by building all their roads on today. I should point out that they don't really hear from the skeptics anymore. So how do we reconcile that roomy run-forward energy with the disciplined 20-mile march. I mean, do we run or do we march? It's a bit of a paradox. I think we do both. I think we have to march with our head and run with our heart. I mean, Miami City Ballet ran forward and hit those goals, but Tanya took pains to remind me of the grit it took that team day after day to hit their marks. And Janice may have been careful and calculated, but when she took over, she told the board her vision was to bring the August Wilson Center to a global stage, and that is exactly what they've done. And to me, that is the lesson. Have an extraordinary vision and build all your roads on today. The words of Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu. The wise have no mind of their own, finding it in the minds of ordinary people. You know, it's a reminder that the greatest wisdom comes from the collective voices of regular folks like you and me. And I was thinking about Lao Tzu and his ordinary people when I heard an extraordinary story from the National Portrait Gallery in London. Now, for most of their 164-year history, they celebrated just about anyone except ordinary people. From Tudor kings to Isaac Newton, they celebrated celebrities. Many of them old, white, male, and wigged, apparently. Now, in recent years, they've broadened the inclusivity of their exhibits, but they felt like there was still more that they could be doing. And when I first spoke with Denise Vogelsang, who is their director of communications and digital, she explained that gallery leadership recognized that they needed to make a major evolution in the stories they told, and the portraits they featured, and in the building itself. And so they announced, starting in 2020, they would be closing their doors for 3 years to reimagine the gallery. And as it happened, they were starting the shutdown process when the pandemic started, making them probably the only Tessitura organization that was accidentally prepared when the lockdowns came. Although Denise was quick to point out that there was no way to emotionally prepare for that time. And with the UK in a strict lockdown, she and her colleagues yearned to do something to lift people's spirits. And as they were talking about ways they could help, a very inventive idea emerged. Now, the mission of the National Portrait Gallery is to promote through portraits an appreciation and understanding of the people who made or are making British history and culture. That would explain the celebrities and the portraits on their walls. But in this moment, in the midst of lockdowns, the people making British history, they weren't celebrities at all. That didn't mean they shouldn't be celebrated. And so rather than trying to manufacture their own digital exhibit, they announced Hold Still, an initiative to invite all of the people of the UK to submit their own portraits of lockdown. The team prepared for about 2,000 submissions. They got 31,000 submissions. Now, why did this go viral? Perhaps we have some professors who can help with that question. One of my favorite books is called New Power by Henry Timms and Jeremy Hymans. And it's a study of the power of ordinary people in a hyper-connected age. And in the book, they contrast what they call an old power model with a new power model. Old power, they say, operates like a currency. It is held by a few. It is closely guarded, like a traditional top-down corporation, perhaps, or a monarchy. Whereas new power operates like a current. It is made by many. It is open. It's participatory. It's peer-driven. You know, for most of their history, the National Portrait Gallery was like the literal face of old power. And yet, with Hold Still, they felt the first rush of how new power could transform them as an institution. As those 31,000 portraits came flooding in, Denise and her team were amazed at their quality and at their power. And she told me that as they were going through them all, they had to take frequent breaks because they kept finding themselves weeping. The wise have no mind of their own, finding it in the minds of ordinary people. Ultimately, 100 portraits were chosen for their digital hold still exhibit, and it was a sensation. 6 million digital visits and climbing. It is 500% bigger than any other exhibit ever in the history of the National Portrait Gallery. And they were just getting started. In cooperation with the national grocery chain, the Co-op, hold still portraits started appearing on bus shelters and on billboards, in grocery stores and on walls all over the country, reaching another 5 million people in small little hamlets and big cities. And when the Portrait Gallery released their Hold Still book, it rocketed to the top of the bestseller list. Now, none of this would come as a surprise to our New Power professors who say the ordinary people and leaders and organizations that flourish in the future will be those best able to harness the participatory power of the people around them. And I suppose perhaps that is the lesson. Ordinary people can become extraordinary together. One thing that they did find, Denise said that as a result of Hold Still, they have changed as an institution. For instance, they're moving away from their brand, the sort of old power sounding people who made or are making British history and culture, in favor of a new brand, which is simply a living portrait of Britain. Put your trust in your community and watch their energy surge. So it was about a month into the lockdowns when I was offered the job of president and CEO of Tessitura. Jack, our CEO and co-founder, had long planned with the board to finish up his tenure at the end of 2020, and I accepted the job with a start date of January 1st, 2021. And I guess this is the confession. When I was reaching out to all those peers, it wasn't so much out of curiosity for me. It was really out of necessity. I had 9 months to figure out how to become CEO of this company, and I kind of needed all the help I could get. And since I took over last year, I have really tried to internalize these lessons, starting with run forward. So last year, we at Tessitura, we watched as you and our industry started to reopen, often with smaller teams and bigger needs for digital tools. And in order to keep pace with your increased needs, we recognized that we were going to have to increase our product development capacity. So I went to our innovation leadership team, and I asked them to look at our roadmap and to look at our staffing and to come back with a list of what they thought we needed. And they came back with a very long list. You know, we needed to complete our migration to the AWS cloud for greater reliability and for scalability. And we needed to continue to evolve our user interface to make it easier to use and easier to learn. And we needed to add more digital-first and mobile-first features. And we needed to continually strengthen our cybersecurity, all for a struggling industry with limited means. And yet, when we looked at that long list, we knew what we needed to do. And by and large, we knew how to do it. What we didn't have enough of were the people to get it all done. And so I went to John, our CIO, and I asked how many more folks he thought we would need to get through all that work. And I honestly thought he was going to say like 8. Yeah. He said 37. And this could have been the moment when we, cooled our jets. But I had Tanya and the Miami City Ballet kind of ringing in my head. I had Rumi burning in my heart. And I went to the whole leadership, and we all agreed that in these treacherous times for this sector and for all of you, that it was our obligation for Tessitura to run forward. And so in October of last year, less than a year ago, our executive team went to the board with a new business plan that included several million-dollar investment to propel innovation at Tessitura. The board unanimously approved it. And since that time, we have more than doubled our product development team. So are we running forward? Well, thanks to Team Tessitura, a group of humans that I unbiasedly believe to be the greatest team on the planet, we completed our migration to the AWS cloud. And we rolled out Tessitura Merchant Services in all of our regions, and we brought version 16, long awaited, to general release with all of the benefits that come with it. As you heard on Monday, we are well on our way to our digital wallet integration. We are quickly migrating the rest of our user interface, all the while providing abundant learning resources, world-class support, and dedicated professional services. I hope that you can feel it. We are running forward, and we are just getting started. At the same time, we're trying real hard to remember the lesson of Janice and the August Wilson Center, having clear, consistent progress. So for instance, our version 16 rollout is kind of like our 20-mile march. Last year, 5 organizations alpha tested version 16. And at the top of this year, rather than 1 beta testing period, we announced and planned for and executed on 3 in February, in March, and in May. And rather than a handful of beta testing organizations like we've done in the past, this time we had 30. It was the largest and most comprehensive testing period we have ever had for any release. And even now that we're live with v16, we're continuing to move ahead with discipline, releasing new features on a regular cadence over the next several months, building all our roads on today. But the biggest lesson, I suppose, is the one that we already knew. Just like the National Portrait Gallery found their greatest success when the public became their artists, we at Tessitura know that we succeed because our community, all of you, are the artists of our mission. Starting with our 15-person member-led board and the 105 community chairs leading 77 Tessitura community groups all around the world, to the 30 organizations that helped test version 16 for us, to the 10-member community DEAI advisory committee, to the 150 panelists and presenters and moderators and content creators here this week at TLCC, and to all of you. The Tessitura community is a huge, huge, positive current surging through the world of arts and culture, making the world better. Which brings us back to Professor Brett Egan, who admonished us to have nothing less than an absolutely visionary concept for the future. Last year, Tessitura announced our vision, working towards a day when every human and every community we serve has arts and culture as a meaningful part of their life. It's a pretty startling mission for a software company. But of course we're not just a software company. We're a movement of thousands of arts and culture professionals devoted to enriching their communities. Professionals like Tanya and her colleagues at the Miami City Ballet who ran forward and closed that campaign and brought all of this to Miami. Professionals like Janice and her team at the August Wilson Center who built all their roads on today, leading to an institution that is illuminating the African-American experience in Pittsburgh and around the world. Professionals like Denise and her colleagues at the National Portrait Gallery who saw wisdom in ordinary people and brought these extraordinary portraits to 11 million people. Think about the tremendous impact that these 3 women and their 3 organizations have had on their communities. And now imagine the impact that every one of us could have on our communities. Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? Imagine if every single person in this community, 10,000 professionals strong, dared to run forward, to build all your roads on today, to find wisdom in ordinary people, and to work towards a day when everyone in your communities has arts and culture as a meaningful part of their life. If you can imagine that world, perhaps you can imagine a day when our wounded world takes a turn for the better. The words of Amanda Gorman. When this ends, we'll smile sweetly, finally seeing in testing times we became the best of beings. Thank you.